The tools are going to change, the platforms are going to change. Honestly, the metrics are going to change as we get more sophisticated and the tools change, right? The humans don't change.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to the Tomorrow's Best Practices Today podcast. We have a genuine treat today. I'm really pleased that Ashley Faus has made time to hang with us today and talk to us about her new book, Human-Centered Marketing, How to Connect with Audiences in the Age of AI. This book is an incredibly pragmatic, it's practical, it's tactical, but also super thoughtful guide to how, as marketeers, we can think from strategy down to day to day about how to connect with folks in the age of AI, how to do better marketing, be better stewards of our brand and of our offerings. Ashley, beyond being a terrific author, is head of Lifecycle Marketing at Atlassian. So she knows a thing or two. She's been there since 2017. So well versed in the modern world of marketing that we're all trying to live in. Welcome, Ashley. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's always still so fun when somebody holds the book up and it's like, oh, someone has it and read it and says it's really good. So that still feels really good. So thanks for having me.
I tell you, absolutely. Thank you for making the time. We're going to dig into this. I was going to say tome, but it's not a tome. It's plenty of info, but a super easy read. Ashley, you're a great, very accessible author. So you guys pick up this book. We're going to talk about this again at the end, I'm sure, but pick it up because you're going to digest it very readily. And Ashley, I think what I kind of pull out as your thesis underneath everything is a quote that I loved that I pulled out. We need to get back to the foundations of humans showing how their offering solves problems for humans. I love that. I mean, that's the heart of human-centered marketing. So maybe we can start there just with your how you came to the human-centered marketing deeper thesis. It's something we all think about, but we don't all write a book about it. So what kind of pushed you over the edge to share your point of view on this?
Yeah. Well, I've actually held this view for pretty much my entire marketing career. And I actually started college as a musical theater major. And my freshman year, I had some issues with my vocal cords. And so I had to find a new major. And so I'm looking through the catalog and, looking through job descriptions and trying to figure out what do I want to be when I grow up if I'm not going to be, a Broadway star, which that's a separate conversation. But I stumbled into this marketing 101 class and I opened the book and the first line said, marketing is about people. And I shut the book and I walked out and I was like, great, I'm a marketing major now. And so basically throughout my career, I've always kind of said, I never want to sell anything to anybody, which sounds counterintuitive for a marketer to say, but it gets at that heart of if you serve your audience, if you match problems with solutions for people, if you get back to the humans behind the screen, the wallets, the revenue, the expansion in this case, from a subscription standpoint, the renewals, all of that will come. And so if we want to win the wallets, we have to first win the hearts and minds. And then obviously coming from a SaaS background, we have to keep winning and re-winning that. And so as I've gotten more senior in my career and as I've worked more in tech, the rise of all of the attribution software, the rise of all of the tracking software, we're just beat over the heads with software, track it, dashboards, signals, data. And now with AI, there's all sorts of, shakeups with AI. And at the end of the day, the stuff that's actually working is serving the audience and remembering that there's a human behind the screen. And so that's really what I wanted to come back to with the book. Obviously, from a frameworks perspective and a tactics perspective, we have to make money, right? We want to grow in our careers. And in order for us to do that, our teams have to make money. Our businesses have to make money. We have to show actual impact. But we cannot do that if the only thing we're focused on is the spreadsheet and we aren't building that trust, we aren't serving the needs of the audience, we aren't actually helping them solve their problems.
trust is such a central concept, such a central tenet. You kick the book off with it, and it flows throughout. And having gotten to spend some time with you at lead tail dinners, and et cetera, got to know you a little bit. I did know the musical theater background story, but it's so impressive spending time with you. And I mean that literally. You just make such an impression with your enthusiasm, your commitment around how you go about marketing and how you think good marketing is done. How do you, I mean, because I want to dig in on metrics, I want to dig in on attribution, all that stuff, but just here at the front end, talking to you and as folks are meeting you, well, how do you think about bringing yourself to, you know, you just seem to do a great job bringing your personal enthusiasm into your profession, and I think that's sometimes, particularly for marketers, is am I faking it if I'm doing that, or am I committed enough if I'm not? How do you think about that? How do you find that balance? Because it's very arresting and very it makes such an impression.
I think for me, the reminder that we are always our full selves. So we lean into different facets of ourselves depending on the
Mm.
situation and the context and the goals that we have for that moment. But I am still Jim Ashley while I'm sitting here on this podcast, right? I'm still wife Ashley when I'm on this podcast. When I'm in kind of hangout family mode, right? I'm still marketing Ashley. My marketing brain doesn't shut off, right? And I think for me, that sense of work-life integration, and my bio says marketer, writer, speaker by day, singer, actor, fitness fiend by night. And if you look, as you see in the book, I bring in so many of those aspects
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
terms of falling in love with the audience, understanding their language, their pain, their motivation. That's exactly what you do when you are in theater and you're performing in a musical. Is who is this person? What do they need in this moment? Why are they doing what they're doing in this moment? To truly be great on stage, you have to internalize that. And it's the same thing in marketing. To truly be great in marketing, you have to fall in love with the audience, not just as a user or as a customer or as a prospect or as a lead, but as a person, right? The fitness analogy is my go-to analogy to demonstrate this concept of content depths, which is basically a different way, one of the elements to start mapping out journeys with assets and campaigns instead of using the linear funnel, right? The linear funnel is very like, we need to get in leads, and we need to get in prospects and awareness, and then we need to convert them into leads and consideration. We need to convert them into customers into purchase, right? And it's like, you've completely stripped the actual humanity out of it versus, again, from a fitness perspective, right? Everybody kind of gets this sense of what does it mean to be healthy and fit? It's some combination of diet and exercise, but you're going to answer that question very differently if you're runner's world versus muscle and fitness versus yoga journal. That's such a relatable style. Somebody somewhere has done one of those types of activities at some point, right? Everybody has tried to get stronger, tried to lose weight, or had to take PE in elementary school at minimum, right? And so that's a much more relatable way. And for me, I nerd out about that stuff in my personal life. And so if I happen upon somebody who's like, wait, you're into bodybuilding? Okay, you do marketing and bodybuilding? Like, we gotta talk, right? And now I've made that personal connection and they light up. And so now we're both lighting each other up because, yes, we can nerd out about marketing, which I love to do. But now you're telling me we have shared language for bodybuilding too, or for baking too, or for theater too. Like, that is a much stronger connection. And how sad if we never discover those connections because we're just stuck in our spreadsheets of like, well, let's talk about the lead conversion into, prospect conversion. And it's just like, who are you as a human, And if you can bring that passion, if you can uncover that passion with your coworkers, with your audience, with your users and your customers, it makes for not only a richer life, but obviously richer pipeline, richer revenue, richer teams, right? Like, this is not just about, building, obviously from a marketing perspective, it is about attracting customers, but this applies from a leadership perspective as well to attracting and retaining talent on your team. So
Right.
some of this is
Right.
just like a life philosophy, right? Of like, I don't want to live a dull, dreary life. So let's infuse the passion and pull that passion out of other people.
The other thing I like is the way that you take apart some of the classic structures of the way we think about marketing. One of them, you mentioned the kind of the linear funnel. If I, as long as I've got 3 or 4 conversion rates and can count, I can figure out if I'm doing the number or not. But you've got a great Venn diagram that you kind of traverse through the book. And it's got 3 circles that intersect, in the middle being success as a marketeer. And they're kind of, I kind of think of them as different components, kind of at different levels. And I thought it was interesting. I'd just love to hear how you pick these 3 components of your Venn diagram, which is thought leadership, which I always think about like branding and the content there, but then content strategy. It's like, well, that's kind of content too. And social media, which arguably is another form of content, but also the conversation with the prospect and the customers. Why do you see those as the 3 circles that you need to make cross to be successful?
So it's funny because as I've made my way around different specialties in marketing, I started at much smaller companies where I was more of a generalist, kind of owning all of marketing, working on a bunch of different projects. During my time at Atlassian, which is a much larger company that has specialist teams, I've worked in content marketing, I've worked in product marketing, and now I sit in Lifecycle, which is kind of that demand gen piece of it. And so it's interesting because I didn't set out to define those 3 diagrams in the sense of like, what are the things? It's more in my day job as I was tackling problems and finding that I needed to explain. And it's funny, you were correct that the Venn diagram says content strategy, that playground. Since I sent the book off, I would actually say that should really be more about journey mapping. Content is a piece of it, and I think there's some of that in the social media piece as well, which is why, again, there's like the diagrams and they have some of those shared frameworks. So for me, it was really about solving problems in my day job and explaining, why am I doing it this way? Why am I making this recommendation? Why is it working or not working? And getting to shared language, getting to shared understanding, and like getting buy-in for the different tactics. And it was like, oh, okay, well, if I'm struggling with this, maybe other people are struggling with this. Is there a common framework that all of these tactics and strategies roll into that has some first principles? So the playground analogy, which right now sits in the bucket or whatever, the circle called content strategy, I actually think is broader than that because from a campaign standpoint and a metric standpoint, right, how you think about the journey, if you think of it as a linear funnel or a looping decision journey versus a playground, that is a very big mindset shift into how you create your campaigns, how you create all of those touch points, which platforms you choose to show up on, your media mix, et cetera. Yeah. So when I initially came up with that framework, I was actually sitting in more of a content marketing team. And so my lens was more around content, but then I moved into product, into life cycle. And so it's kind of funny because I'm like, well, actually, I would rename my own framework. And so it's funny because I think sometimes people are like, oh, yeah, you wrote a book about AI? And I'm like, no. I wrote a book about humans and seeing the rise and the adoption of AI and how the language and mindsets have shifted around marketing. Given our current landscape in AI, there's some fundamental truths that have not changed. That's what the book is really addressing. The tools are going to change. The platforms are going to change. Honestly, the metrics are going to change as we get more sophisticated and the tools change, right? The humans don't change. And so I didn't really sit down and decide that like, these are the buckets. It was more, I'm solving this problem in this context. Is there a more generalized framework that others might benefit from? And then obviously once the book came, it was like, great, I'll just pull all of these together. Funny enough, the publisher, when I first was working through the book proposal with them, they were like, is this actually 3 books? And I was like, no.
I don't got 3 books in
one. So it is funny though, hearing that you interpret it as I like sat down and came up with these 3 buckets, and then in my mind, I'm like, oh no, those are just the frameworks that I was working through given my context, right? So, well,
and it cracks me up so much because I'm sure we've all sort of been through that same process of like, well, I need to, I need to kind of put down the strategy. for marketing or for our business. And it's really, if you think about it, it's 1, 2, and 3. And then you start putting stuff in. It's like, well, that's kind of, is that 1 or 2? Well, actually, no, it's A, B, and C. And you're always kind of, even after you send it off to the publisher, right? These things continue to move. In my experience, it's always so difficult. Like, a board, the board wants you to be thought leaders, or the CEO wants to be a thought leader, but they don't really want to have a take. They want to leave, well, I don't want to offend anybody. I want to keep it all open. And I think that social media sort of, it just doesn't allow that all that kind of gets boiled away. You're going to get exposed anyway. Just give us your take. And I just thought that was a really important differentiator with like what you hear when I say thought leadership may not mean what I'm trying to tell you in thought leadership. This is what I'm trying to get across to you.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's so important because particularly in the age of AI, where you can spit out content, you can spit out social media posts, that's a key piece of it, that we still have to have the humans thinking the smart thoughts, right? AI is not going to prompt itself. I mean, at least not at this point. I know we've got, but the agents will just act independently. I'm like, somebody still has to point the agents toward the right goal and the right outcome, right?
Yeah.
And so that's the part where we as the humans have to come in, have those thoughts, have the opinions. The tools can change. And it's so funny because everyone's like, but in the age of AI, you can, spit out content and presentations and all of this stuff. Podcasts now, Notebook LM, right? You can put in a whole transcript of something else and it'll give you, a completely AI generated audio podcast of that. But the people behind it are what's actually making it interesting. And the reality is we've had content farms for years.
Let's talk a little bit. So this is our podcast, B2B marketers, doing it every day, trying to take on this AI wave. These questions that we pose here, how would you advise folks, I know you do in the book, that you take on getting there through this, of being AI for everybody wants to hear about all the things you're doing in AI, but knowing that you still need to inject the soul into it. How do you where do you find that soul? Where do you extract it? How do you make sure it is what's feeding your content strategy, even if you're using AI to generate, even if you're using AI to customize, even if you're using AI to do research?
There's actually a book that I read in college and I've come back to many times over the years. I recommend it to everybody. It's a book called The Medici Effect by Franz Johansson, and it's all about creative problem solving. And in the book, basically, he profiles all of these projects where they basically bring together these specialists from a variety of different fields. So there was one example where I think it was like a nonprofit. They were trying to build headquarters in a country that did not have robust infrastructure for things like air conditioning and electricity and on and on. And the temperatures would get really high during the day. It was like a desert situation. And so they were stumped on how they would do temperature regulation in this building. And so they brought together an entomologist, which is someone who studies insects, and an architect. And they basically were like, make a building. And the entomologist looked at anthills and termite hills, I guess. I don't know if they're called termite hills, but the things termites live in, the towers, to basically understand how do the insects regulate temperature in these harsh environments. You can appreciate that someone different than you would have a different perspective on this. Maybe you don't know exactly who you need. So to use AI as a thought partner to say, here's who I am, here's the problem I'm trying to solve. Be 5 different people. You could think of 5 different professions, right? Like, again, I remember being blown away that the people who shoot off the fireworks at 4th of July, like that's a whole job, right? Pyrotechnics and all of that is a whole job. So think of some job that is just crazy. Like, who does that job, right? Tell AI to be that person to help you solve this problem. And so I think it's less about outsourcing the whole problem, and it's more about augmenting things that it would be really hard for me to find the right pyrotechnic or the right entomologist to help me solve this problem. But with AI, I can tell it, go be this person, right? And it has access to the entire internet to be that person enough to help me rethink how I solve a problem. So that's one example where I think there's a ton of potential for that. And I've actually used it on kind of a smaller scale to help me prep for a debate. So I did a debate at Inbound last year on I was like creator versus corporate, who creates better content. And so funny enough, I was actually arguing in favor of corporate marketers, which is a little humorous,
Oh,
but
yeah.
I like to make it hard on myself, right?
Yeah.
So
Mix
I
it
can
up, Ash.
obviously
Sure.
argue either side of the debate. And so I basically argued with like myself and with ChatGPT and like went round and round on this argument and doing research and points and had it poke holes in my argument, poked holes in my opponent's argument, right? So I I think we need to not think of it as like what work can AI replace
Hmm.
or what workflows belong to AI as much as it is how does AI augment and where can it fill gaps that would be very difficult for me to find the right human in a timely manner for the right price, right, to help
Yep.
me solve.
And you may not even know. You may not be able to anticipate the thought partner, right? I mean, that's the other power I think sometimes still gets left out in prompt in doing a really great prompt is the persona, for lack of a better word, that you'd like the AI to serve as your thought partner in, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it can go figure that out for you too.
So I actually think that we need to do a better job. And again, this is something I try to implement with my team to build the buffer into every timeline to give them the opportunity to experiment with AI and say, is this something that maybe we could incorporate AI into the workflow or into the deliverable? How much time do you need to go figure that out? And again, this assumes just, oh, they should just do it with AI. Okay, do we
Yeah.
have the AI tool? Are we allowed to use it? Do they know how to use it? Is this actually the right deliverable for them to use it for? And trying to tell somebody to just do AI in their workflows without building in the buffer and without making it safe to fail. Like, this is the other thing where I've come to them and I've said, go try it with AI. We're going to build in some extra time. That way, if it works, you need to write up what you did and why it works. If it fails, you now have to redo the work as a human and also do the write up of why it
That's
failed,
right.
right? That's a lot of extra work
Yeah.
to just do AI. And so that's the other piece of this that I think as leaders, this idea that we're just going to mandate that everybody become AI first, like, are you giving them time to experiment and try different tools, do the write ups, share the learnings with their teams? And if it doesn't work, letting them have space to then redo it with their human skills, right?
The career arc overall of folks. Um, uh, how do you think about the teams that you're building and the teams that you're advising and working across the organization in terms of how listeners might be thinking about their career path and how they should be looking around the corner with AI coming onto the scene?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest concerns for me is that AI, to your point, most of the junior level, that like 101 level work, preps you to do 201, 300 level, 501
Yeah.
and beyond level work, right? I got to where I am in my career because I started with that 101 level work and slowly worked my way up. And now I solve 501 level problems, right? So that's the first issue is how do we it still ensure that the junior humans that we need in 10 years to be senior humans do enough of the work to build the intuition to troubleshoot, to spot things that are off, et cetera. So that's the first piece. The second piece is I hear a lot, especially from mid-career folks. I just want to do strategy, right? Part of
And
strategy,
sometimes early, early.
yeah, it's very early, and then I think I feel like it's like a trough, right? It's like new college grads are like, I'm strategic, and you're like,
I'm really more
actually,
of a
that's adorable,
strategy
right?
guy. Yeah.
Then they get about 5 years in their career, and they're like, I don't think, or maybe it's like three. They get exposed to a few things, and then they're like, "Oof, okay, I'm maybe not." And then they come back up at the like 5 year mark, and like, "I'm strategic again," right? And I think the analogy I like to use for this is basically a puzzle, and it's like at my level in my experience, if someone hands me a box, and you're the same way, right? If I hand you a box and I tell you there's 1,000 puzzle pieces in this box, you can pick the box up and be like, "Nope." You only got half your puzzle pieces in there. Like, I don't even need to open the box. I can tell you that box is missing puzzle pieces, right? And then it's like, well, Clark, sure, sorry, maybe you're missing a few pieces. Like, look in there and see what pieces you're missing. And you can say, these are the pieces you're missing. Okay, do we need to buy these pieces or do we need to build these pieces? Oh, we need to buy them. Great. Here's how much they should cost. Here's how long it's going to take to build them. Here's who can build them. Or we're going to build them. Great. How long does it take to build? Can you build them? Do you need somebody else to build them? You can probably build them, right? Cool. We start going, you've got a mix of brown, blue, and green pieces. Without even looking at the picture on the box, if that puzzle is going to become a desert, a mountain and a lake, or an ocean. If that brown is mountains or sand, right? Because again, you've seen these pieces enough that you only got to get 2 or 3 down and you're like, this is a mountain with a lake and the sky, right? Like I know what these blue and green and brown pieces are. You only know that because you've spent, 10, 15, 20, 25 years building these puzzles and building the different pieces and hand painting them and buying them from the vendors and all of that.
And doing
And that's
100-piece
piece where I'm
puzzles
like,
and 500-piece puzzles.
that like, cool, maybe AI can make the pieces for you faster, but if you don't know that you're even missing pieces, it's like I hand you an empty box and you're like, I got what I need. You don't even know the box is empty. Like it's completely empty. There's nothing, right? And it's like, well, AI can do it. Really? AI can make you 1,000 puzzle pieces. You're just going to tell it you have an empty box and it should have 1,000 puzzle pieces and AI is just going to do that for you? No, right? So that's the analogy I think about where I'm like, how do I make sure that they're getting enough exposure to how many pieces should be in the box, what those pieces are, buy versus build if you're missing pieces, right? And fair enough that the nature of the work will change, but again, I keep going back to there's some fundamental things.
Yeah, and the AI can land you kind of in the right area code, right, to start digging in. But the feedback loop and maybe the follow-on that then is required to further tease stuff out is not only going to get you better information, it's going to build, again, that relationship with your customers, right? I mean, you become more and more of an advisor and more of a resource for that customer, not just somebody that's like clearly they're working on the product roadmap because Chet wants to talk to me for 45 minutes about, my pain points. You just human to human is the only way. All those, just like it's unfortunate that we can't, that we're not sitting across the table from each other for this conversation, because there's a couple of dozen signals that and human connection that we don't get just looking through the screen like this, but even more so in the relationship that you're trying to build with your customers and your prospects. Automating this stuff all down to 1 or 2 very, I guess, optimized channels, it starts to push you away from connection, not pull you toward it.
Yeah. Well, and I think about even some of the, consumer insights, and it's interesting to try to pull some of those thoughts. A big conversation in SaaS is how do we go into a new profitable segment, right? And, trying to look at what are the similarities between the jobs to be done or between the pain points or between the solution sets. And I just think about like baking soda, right? Like how did baking soda jump from a baking product to a cleaning product? You wouldn't normally think of mixing those 2 segments, right? But understanding the properties of it, understanding how people were actually using it, and now obviously Arm & Hammer has, is the leader in baking soda for cakes and is the leader in cleaning products from laundry detergent to, toothpaste and a variety of different things, right? It's like, oh, okay, if people can literally consume this, then maybe it also has, like, you could put it in toothpaste. So we know it's consumer safe, or laundry, right? Where it's like, it's okay for this to be touching my skin the whole day versus something like bleach, where it's like, okay, you should not be dealing with bleach too much. Bleach is real bad for you, right? So like, how did they come up with, and baking soda from a chemical perspective is basically if you mix it with acid and it bubbles. Okay, we know that kind of friction helps clean things, right? Like, who sat down and figured this out, and looking back at it now in hindsight and the little bit of the knowledge that I have from baking, right, to where I know kind of what baking soda does in cakes, I can see it in hindsight of like how they got there, but how did they get there? You know, and so if you're a business, if you're a B2B SaaS company, right, trying to find those profitable segments and a new segment to move into that has enough of a total addressable market and a serviceable addressable market, that's SAM now.
Mm-hmm.
We love a new acronym in marketing, but a serviceable addressable market. Like, how do you get out of your headspace to find a connection the same way that you would find between like baking soda and cakes and cleaning? Like,
Yeah.
and for the companies that can do that and still bring that human creativity and those fresh eyes to it, that's the piece where it's like humans are fascinating. We do fascinating things, right? Like, where is that human insight that shows you that there's actually a profitable segment over here that maybe doesn't seem obvious until after you do it, and then you look back on it and you're like, oh, well, of course that made sense,
Of
right?
course, yeah. The way I did this was, yeah. No, that's it. I mean, the human thread through all of this, right, is the connection between each other. If you want to hear more, Ashley, or talk more to Ashley, she's super active on LinkedIn. You will see her. Connect with her there. Get this book. Get this book, Human Centered Marketing, How to Connect with Audiences in the Age of AI. You've got your homework assignment as well. Your reading assignment for the Medici effort. She's given us that
Medici
as well.
effect.
Medici effect.
Yeah,
Medici
yeah.
effect. I can't read my own handwriting, but AI will do that for me in the future. But Ashley, I just want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for sharing your thoughts, for writing this book, for sharing your thoughts with our audience today. We really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Thanks for letting me go down the rabbit hole on human-centered marketing. It's fun.
Theater, musical theater, chemistry enthusiast, and marketeer, Ashley Faus, everyone. Thank you, guys. Thanks so much, Ashley, and thank you guys for joining us today.